GM everyone, welcome back to another episode of Touch Grass Podcast. We're going on with the VC series that we've been doing for the past week. Today we have Simon from Moonrock Capital, founder and managing partner. Welcome to the show, Simon. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing very well. How about you guys?
All good, all good. When markets are green like this and all our watch lists are green, it's always a good day. But
Yeah,
before we get into all that, like, how do you see just the market overall? We've been through like this very boring phase of crypto for the past couple of months. How do you see the market right now? How is the investing happening for you guys at Moonrock?
yeah. I might be the wrong person to ask that. I think I've been kind of like a permabull for like the last 10 years. So like the kind of approach that we are taking at Moonrock Capital is that we're just like structurally bullish on the industry and hence usually kind of like long only, right? So we don't do like any trading activities or something like this. So yeah, I mean, I'm very bullish. and I think rather recently we also see the market kind of like waking up a bit again, right? In general, I mean, I think I've also been like very vocal about this on Twitter. I actually find it crazy that the kind of like divergence that we are currently seeing between like fundamentals and price action, right? So I think it's definitely been painful to watch over the last months or even years, right? But yeah, I mean, if we kind of like ignore the noise and rather have kind of like a long-term view on the market, which is what we're trying to do, right? Especially for the next 5 to 10 years, we are probably more bullish than ever before. I actually have to say. I mean, I totally get why it's hard, because we are not in this crypto wild west anymore where money just grows on the trees, right? And you can kind of like do like 100x in like a few weeks with like any random shitcoin. And it has become a way tougher game. But I think this is just like a normal cycle for kind of like every emerging industry. And I guess it's also healthy to finally transitioning into that phase where actually fundamentals, revenue, and like basically just the best founders and best VCs and investors win, right? And the rest is kind of like getting filtered out.
Awesome. I mean, if you guys are following Simon, you absolutely should. He'll make you feel like you're not bullish at all. and But yeah, Simon, I've seen some of your tweets explaining how, as you said, the transition to this more mature market with institutional focus and whatnot, and VCs have to step up their game as well. It's no longer where you just throw money at something and it prints for you. What has that change been like? What are some new things that people have to adapt to in terms of just liquid funds, VCs, and also builders in the space? Like, what's the transition looking like right now? And what are some skills you would say that people need to have to kind of survive this kind of next transitive period?
Yeah. So I think that's like a very complex question, actually. I will try to answer it as much as I can. I think in general, we just like see a massive transition right now in terms of kind of like what kind of people we see in crypto, also what type of founders we see in crypto, right? So I think if we think about like the last cycles, it's just been like way too easy to make money, right? There hasn't been anything like fundamental investing or something. It was all about like just catching narrative trades, and yeah, basically no one was building actual businesses, right? This was all just like, yeah, based on narratives and white papers and just like a cool bullish ICO because like a KOL tweeted about it, right? So I mean, it was like a no-brainer to go in there for like a quick 10x or something. And I think like one of the biggest problems we have in the industry is like just the structural problems when it comes to kind of like token versus equity and kind of like its value accrual, right? I think this is kind of like a very tough learning that the industry had over the last few years. So I personally, I would believe like we are already going through this transitions through this transition for like the last probably 4 years or something like this, right? So I think it's this classic like chasm that we have to cross, right? That we know like of these classic early technology cycles, and I'm very bullish about it because I think like with regulatory tailwinds and like institutional adoption, like product market fit of kind of like products like stable coins and prediction markets, we see that like we are definitely onto something here. Like we are definitely about to kind of like cross that chasm, right? And what comes next is obviously super exciting because this is kind of like the early majority that is coming in, and basically the masses and the big money, right? For that, I think though that a lot has to change, right? And this is what I was mentioning in the beginning in terms of kind of like the type of investor and the type of user base and the type of founder that we see in crypto. I think overall, what has to change is kind of like the time horizon of like most people, right? I think like what we've seen in the last few cycles was just short-term pump and dumpers and just like people chasing a quick buck, right? And whenever I kind of like met people outside of crypto, this was exactly what it was associated with. I mean, my friends and family like approached me and were like, I heard I can get rich quick with crypto. I mean, can you help me, right? Like what do I need to buy? I mean, they didn't even care about like what was it doing or what is the industry doing. They just heard you get rich quick, and those times are over. I think the types of investors that are currently joining, they have like a completely different time horizon. They look at those things like structurally and also kind of like fundamentally, right? They want to see like why the product someone is building actually makes sense, right? How does it have product market fit? Like why would it generate revenue? What is the kind of like perspective for it long term, and how can it really kind of like maintain its growth over time? And I think the good thing is that like, especially given that it's not as easy anymore to just launch a token and get rich quickly, this is also how kind of like the type of founder has changed that we see in crypto. So I think a lot of like bullshit founders got quite tired over the last few years and just like exited, right? Because now they're probably like AI founders or something like that. So kind of like the quality of founders that are approaching us or that we are talking to in due diligence has improved massively. And I think this might be the single most kind of like bullish metric I could think about, because they are the ones that are actually building like the fundament of our industry. And eventually they are also the ones that are going to attract kind of like the big money, because like there is without a doubt like a lot of product market fit for crypto, right? Crypto rails can improve a lot of different products by a wide margin, right? By just like being globally accessible and 24/7 and like composable and borderless and everything. And I think we are also a bit like outside of this like experimental phase of crypto where you need to bring like everything on chain. And we kind of like realized we are all about finance, and there are some things that totally make sense and have strong product market fit. There are others that totally don't make sense. And I think we are not chasing those things too much anymore, but rather focusing on like what has product market fit, and we are doubling down on it, right? And building like new businesses on top of stable coins and prediction markets. And I think this is what is also exciting to kind of like non-crypto institutions. And they see the opportunity in that. They see the opportunity in improving the margin of the business, improving kind of like settlement times, and just like overall efficiency of the business. And this is what is going to bring them into our industry. But this is also obviously completely changing the game.
Like, I think one way to put what you kind of said is that if 2 years back, if you asked like 20 people, what's your bet for the cycle, every single person would have a different coin, right? You would never heard about them, but everyone will have a different thing that they are part of a community member. You'll hear hundreds of alts. Everything is famous. Everything is big community. Right now, I think people are like consensus bets are happening, which are really good. People think that Toy Story meme where everyone's like, everyone's BTC hype and Zcash. that's how it should be,
Yeah.
where people are piling into some altcoins which have fundamentals and kind of growth story there. But yeah, I think you have
Mm.
summed it up very well.
I
Another
think
is
KG, I think that also some like pivots into a great question. Like obviously there are consensus bets right now, and there are probably like 7, 8 tickers that everyone unanimously agrees with. Simon, is there like a contrarian bet you have right now in terms of, this is like non-consensus? I believe in this a lot.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I think to most extent, like we have rather consensus bets right now. I think where we are not like too much consensus is like we are not just like holding exactly the same stuff like as all the other kind of like liquid funds out there, maybe like Aave or Hyperliquid or whatever, right? So I think we anyways are like rather contrarian in kind of like the way we are investing with. Other than that, like the most contrarian parts would probably be like we are still kind of bullish on DePin. I mean, I don't like the word DePin anymore like too much because it's also so like negatively associated at this point. But I think what I always loved about DePin is basically just like the concept of like you like the like global coordination of people with tokens, right? I mean, it's basically you give those people tokens and they will do whatever for you. And we're quite impressed by kind of like the networks and like physical like infrastructure networks. And some of these projects were being able to build out by just giving out like some tokens. And obviously, like there was no value accrual for these tokens. They were just like kind of like monopoly money, right? All of this like bled out to infinity, kind of. But we are talking to like some of these DePins nowadays, and what's super interesting is like while most of these tokens look absolutely dead, right? You would never touch them just like by looking at the chart. And they are working on incredibly interesting things because like by just like leveraging that mechanism of kind of like coordinating a ton of people with tokens, and they are now all sitting on incredible data sets, right? Like a ton of data, or like maybe like video data, or like data of kind of like Uber drivers, or like noise data, whatever. They are all sitting on incredible treasuries of like data, and I think now it's about like what those kind of teams are going to do with that, right? Because it's obvious that like data is the biggest bottleneck for both AI and robotics, and I think there's like a lot of opportunity here. And we are talking to some of these DePins that look absolutely dead, but they are actively talking to all the OpenAIs and Anthropics and Amazons and like whatever of this world, right? And they have like insane amounts of like revenue in the pipeline by LOIs. It's just about like, how is this data getting processed now? And do you really just want to sell your data, or do you want to double down on kind of like the data set that you have collected, and you want to build like your own kind of like world models on top of it, something? And so I think this is very interesting. I mean, this is like, to some extent, it's not like a contrarian bet because it's still basically the thesis of intersection of crypto AI, right? But I think this is just something that people don't really have on their radar.
I think
it's definitely contrarian.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think it's definitely underlooked.
Especially, I mean, obviously totally. And I think the problem, obviously, I mean, there are like a lot of problems with it as well, right? Again, like, I mean, the value accrual mechanisms of like these tokens or something doesn't necessarily have changed a lot. But I think like most like founders out there also do understand like that they have to change something about that. Actually, many of them are also like very committed to that. I think something that you also, or like basically all investors out there shouldn't really kind of like forget that they all also have like very big exposure to the token by their team tokens, right? So there is the incentive to actually bring value back to the token. And because it's also not like all of these companies are close to an exit or something like this. So especially at like, as these charts look very bled out and no one has them on the radar, I think it could be an interesting opportunity if you just like put in some work and actually do your research on some of these, right?
100%. And before I ask you about token value accrual methods, which is another hot topic, Simon, is there any projects that you want to shout out within the contrarian bet thesis, like any portcos or anything, any project that someone should look to right now?
I would prefer rather not, because like we're still accumulating some of these and they are rather illiquid, and I don't want them to pump like crazy.
I think yeah, as you said, like there's structural issues with DePin stuff. We've had some of the experts over last year saying the supply side of the things have been solved. Right now, the kind of demand has to catch up. And I think the compute side of things and the data side of things are pretty interesting. But Simon, another kind of, I don't think it's contrarian, but everyone is bullish on it. You're super into collectibles these days. I think you've been talking about cards for a couple of months. I've been seeing, first it was Pokemon cards, then it was One Piece cards. Right now, people are collecting Harry Potter books. So it's kind of, everyone is into this kind of time capsules where they want to be reminded of these things that they really loved and these historic franchises. How do you kind of look at this market where it's kind of like these have been up only for the last 2 years, and there's still everyone's like calling a top on the collectibles market? But how do you see that, and how are you kind of investing in this as an idea where with the AI becoming what it become, like what will happen in a couple of decades, everyone will want to own these timeless assets?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. I mean, just like as a disclaimer, we are investors in both Collector and Beezie. So we have been like early believers in both of these, like since 2024. I think the interesting story here is that like back then, like the market was like actually doing kind of well, right? So I think the VC market was very active. And we started talking to both of these. I mean, funnily, like both of these kind of like reached out to us like at the same time. And before that, like we didn't really have like that market on our radar at all, right? So when we first kind of like heard kind of like Pokemon cards on chain, we were actually rather not taking it like too seriously and rather laughing about it. But I was actually impressed by both of these teams. So we started talking to Tom from Collector and like Andrea from Beezie. And it was just, to us, it was kind of like surprising by how seasoned and professional these founders have been. So we started to take it like more seriously and deep dived into the market, and we're impressed by how huge the TCG market in general is, but also how huge the collectibles market is, right? Which is like the obvious like low hanging fruit to just like expand horizontally to like comics, Harry Potter books, like Rolexes and whatever, right? Eventually you can even bring like art on chain and like Porsches or whatever. I mean, we know like crypto people are kind of crazy. But yeah, in general, I mean, I totally see that like this market is like very hot right now. I mean, maybe a bit too hot. So I wouldn't be surprised about like a retrace and like a correction. And I think it would also be healthy. And I was thinking about this quite a lot recently, because obviously we are also very exposed to the sector by our investments. I think what we shouldn't kind of like mix up here though is that like we're not talking about like random meme coins, right? This is not like any shit coins that don't have like any intrinsic value or something like this. But I mean, regardless of the price, I mean, collectors will always collect, right? I mean, I'm a big collector myself, and I'm collecting stuff since I'm 5, probably. I mean, so I feel the dopamine of kind of like opening packs, and I totally get like the nostalgia effect of like collecting those cards that I loved as a kid, right? So I think fundamentally here we see like a very strong generational shift of like us millennials becoming kind of like the let's say the kind of like generation with the most purchasing power, right? I mean, Gen Z will be even crazier. I think in general, it's just like impossible nowadays for like our generation or like the generation to come to actually afford houses and stuff like that, like stuff that actually matters, right? So what are they supposed to do with their money, right? I think especially for men, like there's maybe like luxury watches they would rather buy into because it's like kind of like the only thing they could afford and flex with. And I think kind of like collectibles is not only just like another very obvious asset class for that, but I think it also gives the people like a lot of fun, a lot of dopamine, a lot of nostalgia. And I think this is worth quite a lot, right? So I would be down to kind of like losing some money on like a Charizard just so that I can keep it, I hold it in my hands every day and look at it, right? So yeah, I think coming back to the question, I think it would actually be healthy for the market to correct to some extent, because I figure that like collectors are pretty annoyed by this incredible pump. Like, I mean, they have been like Pokemon fans for like 2 years, just trying to kind of like collect and buy the cards they love, right? And all of a sudden, like the kind of like Logan Pauls of this world kind of enter the game and just like pump up those valuations like crazy. And the funny thing, like all of a sudden, everyone is like a cards lover, right? And like a collector or something like this, just because it's more expensive, it's also more sought after, right? And everyone is turning into a collector. So I think to some extent this will correct, and then I think this will be also healthy for collectors and the collectible market in general. And this is also how I'm looking at like these on-chain TCG platforms by now, because we're also looking into the data and because I don't know, a lot of befriended investors still are rather skeptical that this is just like another online casino platform or something like this, right? But looking at the data, it's super interesting to see by how many of these, like, let's say, gamblers are actually like keeping those cards that are pulling out of the gacha, or actually are redeeming it out of the vault so they can have like the physical asset at home, right? I think it's like anywhere between 30 to even 50%, which talks a lot about kind of like the user base of these on-chain platforms. And yeah, I'm just like incredibly bullish on it, because we see that like there is product market fit. Like the users also will be rather sustainable users and not just like pump and dump kind of like online casino gamblers or something like this. And apart from that, if you're thinking about it, it just totally makes sense, right? Because I mean, the collectible market is huge, but it's running on rails from like, I don't know, 30 years ago when the internet just like got started, kind of. It's incredible to think about like how inefficient these markets are, like how high fees are. And I just recently bought something on eBay, and like I bought like a shit ton of fees. It was like a massive pain in the ass to get it shipped to my house, and I paid like insane amounts of customs, right? And then in the end, I was actually pretty pissed. But if you would just want to kind of like get that economic exposure to kind of like a Charizard or something, why not just holding it as an on-chain asset, and which is even then kind of like, which is even turning into like a programmatic, like composable asset, right? You could even take like a loan against it or something and put it to work. And so I think there are lots of opportunities there. I think I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think I also do it on Twitter.
100%. So I mean, I'm super. Even I have the same view. Like you mentioned Logan Paul. He said, "I never made any money with stocks. I only made money with Pokemon cards." And I think that not everyone will resonate with semiconductor stocks or Korean stocks. They probably
exactly.
That whole and how much it was, 100 trillion. That's going to be passed from boomers to Gen Z. All that money is not going to the stock market. It's going to go to collectibles. It's going to go to cars. It's going to go to watches, as you said. But Simon, like this collectibles is one area, but I have seen, you're probably one of the VCs I kind of follow who kind of takes these different bets, very novel kind of things in crypto. Is that like, I saw that you're like, let's go back, like you were involved in biomedical in your early career, research and stuff. Like, how did that happen? How did that happen? Transition to VC, and I also saw that you're an investor in some of the kind of projects in the crypto space as well. Talk to us about that transition.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, back then when I got out of school, I think I was just like very much into kind of like in general science and biology, right? So when kind of like my parents forced me to go to university and do whatever, right? I thought like, okay, biology is actually kind of cool. Let's just do that. So yeah, I started studying biology. I did my master's in there. I also started with my PhD, and I always wanted to become kind of like a cancer researcher, right? So I did my PhD in tumor immunology, and I was engineering antibodies against kind of like particular types of cancer. And yeah, I think I was good at it. I think it was also kind of fun, but to some extent, it's like a very depressing job, right? Because you're like you're in the lab every day, and you're just thinking about like what kind of experiments you want to try now. And you spend like, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months with that particular experiments just to find out that, again, obviously it didn't work, right? I mean, and that's a big problem. And this is kind of like the like every day of like every kind of like researcher or like scientist, because it's very rare to find something, and then you're obviously kind of like you get like a Nobel Prize or something, right? So yeah, I mean, this was rather frustrating, and I also didn't want to spend like all my career in the lab, because also, I mean, it wasn't like the most enjoyable type of people that were my colleagues, kind of. And back then, I think it was in 2017. I mean, I just wanted to meet with a good friend of mine, and he basically told me, let's go to a restaurant or something, right? Because I have quite some money right now, because like I turned like $1,000 of I put $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I turned it into like $2,000 within a month, and I was like, okay, that's kind of crazy. I need to try that as well, because I was super broke, obviously, as a student. So I think I took like 400 euros or something like this. Bought ETH just because it was like way cheaper. I was up like 5% in a few days. So I thought I was already kind of like a genius. And then this ICO craze started, right? So I was doing all of that as basically a retail investor. And the ICO craze started, and back then I think I put like, I don't know, 200 euros into 0x protocol, which was kind of like an ICO that like everyone was talking about on Reddit back then. I had no clue what I was doing and what they are doing. I put it in. I thought like the money was gone, because I sent it to the smart contract and didn't necessarily immediately get something back, right? And then like a few days later, my friend called me that I have to check my 0x bags, and they were, I think like they were up like 10x in 2 days or something like this. And I was like, okay, I love crypto. This is like the greatest shit ever. So obviously I immediately got addicted. I played like the whole ICO craze. I think I turned like my $400 into kind of like 30K or something in half a year. And then I lost it all again. I round tripped it all in 2018. I wasn't prepared for something like a bear market. I didn't even know what finance was, kind of. But what was always particularly interesting to me is like I'm someone who's losing interest quite quickly. But I didn't lose my interest on crypto, because I was spending a lot of time in like these Reddit, like subreddits and like Telegram groups and stuff. And I really had the feeling that I was onto something here, and that crypto, like, while it was obviously like the Wild West and kind of like an online casino, I really had the feeling that there was also like a lot of this cypherpunk spirit going around, right? That this is really something that is going to change the world to whatever extent. And so it was just something that I always was very interested in and we're doing on the side. And then back then I met my former like co-founder, and he was also German, so this was special. Like, you are also in crypto and you're also German. Like, that's super cool. Let's connect. And he was basically working at traditional venture capital. And he also said like he wants to get rid of his job and stuff. Let's just do something together. And we started this kind of like research house, which was called like BlockFire. And we're just like issuing research reports on like some liquid tokens out there that we thought were interesting. We deep dived into it, and yeah, we're issuing these 20 pages reports like with a rating in the end, whether you should buy that asset or not, right? I mean, it was totally financial advice actually. So yeah, I mean, this is how we kind of started working in this industry. This is how we started like building our first network. We connected with founders. We built kind of like a community and following on Twitter. And then we got approached by quite some founders who were like, yeah, can you also issue a report about us, because like we will also give you access to our seed round or something, because we will do TGE like in 2 days or something like this. And then we started investing into these deals, do research reports for them. Everything went kind of all right. And then at some point we realized, I mean, it's kind of like a conflict of interest, right? To be invested into these or like even get paid for reports. And then you obviously always have like a very biased opinion on these projects. So at some point we just stopped like with issuing these reports. And we founded Moonrock Capital, which we thought was like kind of like a cool Degen brand or something, right? We still had no clue what we were doing. We just founded Moonrock and put in all the capital that we had and started investing, because we built that network to get access to these deals. And then we were obviously also like very lucky with the timing, with the giga cycle of 2020 and 2021.
That's awesome. I feel like everyone has this "we will get rich quick" sort of hook into the industry,
Yeah,
and then
totally.
sort of find out more about it. I think it's the natural way. Simon, with your biomedical sort of past, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of thoughts on DeSci. I'm pretty sure I've seen a lot of tweets from you on DeSci. What do you think about the state of DeSci right now?
So it's interesting. Obviously, we invested in quite some DeSci projects out there. So we are investors in Bioprotocol and also like Brian Armstrong's research hub. So I mean, I like it and I hate it to some extent, right? Because I think to some extent it definitely makes sense. I think like what Bio is doing is they kind of like they leverage kind of like this mechanism of global capital formation very efficiently to actually fund things that make sense, right? So I come from academic science and I totally know how broken this industry is and how tough it is to get like funding for your research projects, right? So either you are like a very prestigious professor who will always get their grants, or you kind of like research things that are just like very hyped, right? So you need to do research on like diabetes or kind of like cancer, right? Because those are kind of like the hype topics that everyone is getting sick of. But obviously, if there are like some people who want to do some research about like rare diseases, like no one will care about that, right? And I think this is like a very broken fact about this industry. And I think what Bio did was like super cool. They just like they kind of leveraged that meme coin dynamic to bring capital to stuff that actually matters, right? I mean, it was still kind of meme coins, but I would rather prefer a meme coin where in the back end, like something like fundamentally like very important is happening rather than just like a dog with head, right? So I think that's cool. What's rather broken with that mechanism is that meme coins usually, I mean, people who are bidding meme coins have like a very short attention span, right? And they don't want to wait longer for like a week or something. And obviously it's a bit tough, like when we're talking about like research, which has rather like a time horizon of like, I don't know, 10 to 20 years. And I think that's something that is still kind of a problem. And I think so they have to come up like with new mechanisms to kind of like align the long-term horizon of like researchers and the short-term horizons of like degens. But yeah, in general, I mean, there were also like a lot of haters about DeSci, and I totally get it because like most of it is bullshit, right? But I think if you're digging deep into it, there are actually some very cool things happening. And think also the fact that Brian Armstrong is probably one of the most influential like crypto guys is doing his own DeSci project. They're obviously not loud about it, right? They just want to build and they just want to have like an impact. And I think there are actually very cool things happening, because I think like the whole like journaling like vertical of research is also very broken, very monopolistic. So there are some very obvious things in academia and kind of like research that are too broken, that are too centralized. And I think crypto rails have the potential to disrupt some of these, right? But it will take ages, and I think this is not what crypto DeFi are ready for.
I think some of these bets, how I look at them is everyone's talking about peptides, different health tech companies. They see that this is a growing trend, and it's like it's not just a fad. Everyone is into these things. And what is the one bet or two that we can make in crypto that can kind of capture that attention? So it's like proxy bets to that trend that's kind of going parabolic and TradFi thing. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think you also need to appreciate the industry to appreciate the intersection of that industry with crypto. It's kind of like AI crypto, where everyone on CT will call it, what they will, but someone who's like an AI expert will actually appreciate the nuances of that. Simon, I do want to be mindful of time. I think we only have like 5 or 6 minutes left. I do have a lot of questions that I wanted to ask you, and we'll probably do a part two of this. As someone, as you mentioned, like you started off doing a lot of research and then you moved into more of a fund structure. Uh, do you have a favorite sort of launch or TGE that was well executed recently? A portco, non-portco, something that had a lot of eyeballs that you thought was done well?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think like one that was like very interesting was MegaEth actually. I mean, it's not necessarily a podco. I just aped into kind of like the public sale. I think I'm obviously also very vocal about like how cancerous I think like centralized exchanges are, right? So what I always appreciate about like the MegaEth team is they had kind of like the courage to kind of like try out new things, right? Maybe on kind of like their fundraise, right? Where they rather brought in the big community at the same terms as like, let's say Dragonfly, right? Or the go-to-market strategy where they said like, okay, we transparently tell you about kind of like our TGE, but it's like those KPIs. So either we are hitting them or like this token is not going to launch like at any time soon, right? And I think like this approach of like MegaEth, where they were just saying like, look, like we won't give like a single exchange, like a single token, and whoever wants to list us, like feel free. But we're not giving out like any marketing budgets, not any market making budgets and stuff like this. I found this like very impressive actually, because centralized exchanges still have like a lot of power, and most projects out there feel kind of forced to actually like, yeah, stick to their rules, and just so they can tap into like the liquidity and like the distribution. And I found it like very refreshing that like a team kind of like knows their worth, right? They are treating their token as like the most valuable asset and not kind of like as monopoly money that you're just like airdropping away. And they're treating their community very highly, and they have like a clear vision where they want to go, and like how value is going to accrue to the token and stuff. And I was just like rooting for them so badly that like every shitty exchange out there listed them for free, right? So I thought this was actually great, and so very well deserved. And yeah, I would just wish that like more of like that we would see more strong founders and that actually know their worth and basically do the same. And yeah, so that we can kind of like break this vicious cycle of just like destroying retail forever, kind of, just to extract like more value and squeeze the lemon, kind of.
I think the founder said it pretty perfectly that if we don't meet these basic KPIs, MegaEth doesn't deserve to exist. So I think that was very well said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think MegaEth will like? I was going to ask this next question, but do you think they will have like the next breakout app, or do you have any other chain in mind? that will be the next kind of breakout. Like how PumpFun was for Solana, we have all these other perplexes and whatnot for prediction markets.
Yeah.
But is there do you think MegaEth or any other chain will have the next breakout app?
Yeah, so we are very bearish on new chains, kind of. Like we would never ever kind of like back a new L1, L2, whatever nowadays. So because we just see how tough it is to attract liquidity users and like and also people don't care. There's nothing such as like chain alignment or something, right? And also like developers, you can give them like millions in grants and they don't care about your ecosystem. Like once and they see like a better opportunity, they will just like migrate away. So yeah, I like usually like we would want to see like stuff being built on Solana and Base because this is just like where all the users are and all the liquidity is, right? But we are very interested in a MegaEth ecosystem because like we don't care too much about like the technical details there, right? Like how much more throughput there is and like how much more they are, like how much more special they are on the technical level towards like other ecosystems, because we don't really see this as kind of like the big constraint here nowadays. But we are just impressed by the ability to attract like these very, very talented founders that build kind of like new stuff, right? So those weren't like founders who said like, MegaEth is like a new ecosystem. Let's just copy paste Uniswap and put it on MegaEth and call it like Megaswap or something like this, right? I think we are very sick and tired of that kind of stuff, but we want to see people trying out new stuff. And I think what you see like with world markets on MegaEth, or also Top Strike or Euphoria, and like they have like so many interesting things going on. And I don't necessarily have like a strong opinion on like whether like some of these will be like the next breakout apps, but I like if there's like a hub where I just see like a lot of experimentation going on and kind of like a lot of very talented founders that have the courage to kind of like try out new things and take a shot to like a 0 to 1 innovation. This is definitely a hub that I want to pay attention to. And so I think MegaEth as an ecosystem, but also as kind of like an application ecosystem, is definitely probably one of the most interesting places for us right now to see cool stuff happening.
Yeah. I think I would describe it in a way where they're taking so many good shots at the goal with, how they're kind of creating this builder vibes and builder ecosystem and having these new apps. And every app is kind of unique in its own way. Obviously, with the TGE and launch, there's going to be a ton of FUD. But I think in a couple of months, we'll see some cool things happening there. But yeah, Simon, we are almost at time. Yeah. We've been asking this question to every VC. What's your biggest miss so far in your 7 or 8 years in crypto? Anything that still keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I think like two things come to mind. Like one is like the founder of PumpFun reached out at the pre-seed round and that they were raising around. And we just kind of like ghosted him because we were like, okay, like a launch pad for meme coins. Like what kind of stupid shit is that? So I think that's kind of like that was like a tough miss. And I think like another one was, not sure if you guys can remember Portchain. So RUNE, like the ticker RUNE. They were actually doing like super interesting stuff back then. And we bought like a lot of the supply at actually 1 cent. Which was, I think, like a 1 million FTV or something like that. And we were holding it forever and was just going sideways. And the founders knew that we were holding a shit ton of supply. And I think they didn't like that. And they were constantly reaching out to us and actually telling us strange things like, trust me, bro, you should rather sell now because you won't like what's coming next and stuff. So it was kind of like strange and also shady to some extent. So I think
for those wondering, the coin went to, I think, what, $12?
It was like $20 or something like this. So yeah, we bought like a shit ton at like at 1 cent, and then I think when it pumped to, I don't know, I think 8 or even 10 cents or something, we sold all of it, because like it was still, I think it was 2019, and the market was pretty shitty, and we were doing like a 10x, right? So we felt like geniuses just to watch it like going to like a few thousand x. Was a pretty tough one.
We all have a couple of those. But yeah, Simon, this was awesome chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. Talk soon.